The storm outside was soft but cold, and the wind whispered across the trees. Inside a small wooden cabin near the edge of the forest, Luke sat beside the fire, holding a warm cup of tea. He looked out the window, not at the snow, but at the empty hill behind his house, the place where she once stood, the place where she said goodbye. Years ago, the tiny alien girl had stumbled into his life like a lost kitten. She was small, barely reaching his waist, with pale blue skin and eyes that glowed like stars. Her voice was soft and her body always trembling, but she was curious, always asking questions, always watching him. Luke had found her near the wreckage of a fallen pod. She had no name, no translator, and no family, so he gave her a name, Star, because that's how she looked when she smiled under the night sky. She stayed with him for 2 months, hiding from patrols, learning his language, and watching the human world through wide eyes. She wasn't just a child. There was something more in her, something older, deeper, hidden behind those glowing eyes. But she still laughed like a child, played like a child, and cried like one too. One morning she stood in the snow without shoes, arms crossed, looking up at him seriously. "I am grown now," she said in a clear voice. Luke blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" She nodded. "They will come for me soon, and I must go." He felt something inside him crack. "You don't have to leave, Star," he said, kneeling in front of her. "You can stay. This is your home." She shook her head. "If I stay, they will burn your home and take you." Her small hand touched his chest. "You were kind to me, and now I must protect you." A light shined in the sky moments later. A ship, silver and silent, hovered above the hill. Star turned to walk toward it, her steps slow but sure. Luke called her name once, his voice shaking. She stopped, Ned back, and smiled sadly. "I am grown now," she whispered again, "but I will return." Then she vanished into the light. The ship left with a soft hum, and the sky became quiet once more. Luke stood there for hours in the snow. He never forgot that day. He never forgot her. Years passed, and no one believed him when he told the story. An alien child? They laughed. "You need rest, Luke." So he stopped telling the story. But every year, on the same night she left, he lit a candle by the window. Just in case she remembered, just in case she kept her promise. Tonight was one of those nights. The wind knocked softly at the window. He sipped his tea, closed his eyes, and whispered to the empty cabin, "I hope you're safe, Star." But he didn't know. Just outside, standing at the edge of the trees, someone watched him through the shadows. She was taller now, older, and wore strange armor over her pale skin, but her eyes still glowed. She watched him for a moment longer, then turned away silently. She had returned, but not yet to his door. Not yet. Something was following her. And this time she was not just a tiny alien girl, she was something else entirely. And her story was only beginning. The fire was dying, and the night had grown colder. Luke placed another log into the flames and wrapped his old blanket tighter around his shoulders. The wind howled louder than usual, like something wasn't right in the forest. He looked at the door for the 5th time, heart heavy with memory. It had been years, but he still hoped, still dreamed. He didn't expect what happened next. A soft knock broke the silence. Once, then again. 3 slow taps that barely touched the wood. Luke stood, confused, then cautious. He hadn't heard a car, no footsteps in the snow, and his dog, long gone now, would have barked already. He picked up the old rifle from the wall and moved toward the door. His voice was steady but low. "Who's there?" No answer. He unlocked the door and opened it slowly. And there she stood. Her face was older, her body no longer childlike, but her eyes, those glowing eyes, were still the same. Star. She stood there in a torn cloak, armor cracked, covered in snow and bruises. She was breathing fast, as if she'd run a long way, but the way she looked at him, it wasn't fear, it was relief. "I told you I'd return," she whispered, her voice shaking. Luke dropped the rifle without thinking. "Star," he said, barely believing his eyes. She stepped inside without waiting, closed the door behind her, and leaned against it. "I don't have much time," she said quickly. "They're close." Luke stared at her, taking in the strange weapon at her waist, the burns on her arm, the sharpness in her voice. She was grown, yes, but something had broken her along the way. "Who's following you?" he asked. She looked up at him, pain in her eyes. Hunters? He frowned. Like bounty hunters? No, she said quietly. Like exterminators. He helped her sit by the fire and wrapped a thick blanket around her. She didn't protest, but her hands didn't stop trembling. I escaped them, she said. Eyed slowly, took something they want, something important. Luke didn't ask what it was, not yet. She needed warmth first, and food, and time to breathe. He brought her warm tea, the same kind she used to like as a child. She smiled faintly, the smallest smile he'd seen in years. It tastes the same, she whispered. You remember that? He asked, surprised. I remember everything, she said, staring into the fire. Especially you. A sudden crack echoed outside, like a branch snapping under heavy boots. Her hand went instantly to her weapon, eyes sharp again. Luke turned off the lights. They both went still, listening, then silence. But she didn't relax. They have drones, she whispered. Small, silent ones, already scanning the area. Luke's heart beat faster. What do they want? She hesitated. To erase the past and everyone tied to it. She looked at him. That includes you. He didn't flinch. Instead he stood, grabbed the hidden latch under the rug and opened the old trapdoor. Come with me, he said. I have something to show you. Her eyes widened. You still have it? He nodded. I never stopped preparing for this day. Together, they climbed down into the cold darkness below, and as the hatch closed above them, the sound of another distant knock echoed through the trees. But this time, no one answered. The underground bunker was cold but safe. Luke lit the old lights on the wall one by one, revealing the metal room hidden beneath his cabin. Star looked around, her eyes scanning the shelves filled with supplies, maps, weapons, and tools. She ran her hand over the dusty table and whispered, You really kept it all. Luke nodded. Didn't know when, but I knew you'd come back. She sat down slowly, her body sore, her mind still on alert. Luke watched her carefully. Tell me who's after you, he said. She looked up at him, her eyes no longer soft. They call themselves the Black Fang, she said. They don't serve a government. They serve control. Luke frowned. Mercenaries? Worse, she replied. They clean up problems. Like me. He sat across from her, the air between them heavy. What did you steal from them? He asked gently. Star hesitated, then pulled a small device from her armor. It was no bigger than a coin, glowing faintly blue. This, she said, placing it on the table, is a key. A key to what? Luke asked. To a prison, she said softly, where thousands like me are still trapped. Luke blinked, shocked. After they took me, they didn't just train me, they used me to break others. Her voice cracked. I escaped, but not alone, not really. I carry their hope now. She touched the device, and for a moment it showed a hologram, a map, blinking with hundreds of red dots. Each dot is someone still in chains, she said, and they're coming to erase this map before I can free them. Luke looked at her, silent for a long time. Then he stood and opened a crate from the wall. Inside were old weapons from his Earth defense days. He pulled one out and handed it to her. I promised to protect you once, he said. Looks like I still do. Star looked at the weapon, then at him. A small smile returned to her face, but it faded quickly. They're close, she said. Standing. Too close. How do you know? She tapped her wrist, revealing a small pulse screen. 3 heat signatures, moving fast, scanning for life signs. Luke swore under his breath and moved to the control panel. I can jam their scanners for a few minutes, he said, but not forever. Star nodded. That's all I need. She started adjusting the armor on her arms, preparing to fight, but Luke stepped in front of her. You're not alone this time, he said firmly. We fight together. Outside, the forest was quiet, but in the sky, 3 dark shapes moved through the clouds. Their ships didn't roar. They whispered like ghosts. The Black Fang didn't want to scare. They wanted to vanish their enemies before they screamed. The lead hunter, tall and covered in black chrome armor, stepped out into the snow. He raised a hand and small insect-like drones scattered into the air. Find her, he said coldly. End the mission. Back underground, Star felt a pressure in her head. They're using psychic signals now, she whispered, trying to find my mind. Luke grabbed a small metal ring from the shelf. Wear this. What is it? An old neural blocker. It'll hide your thoughts. She slid it on, and the pressure vanished instantly. Her eyes met his again, this time filled with gratitude. You really did prepare for war, she whispered. Luke loaded his rifle and smiled. No, he said, I prepared for you. And above them, the hunters began to circle closer. The real fight had just begun. The cold lights in the bunker flickered as dust floated through the air. Luke stood beside an old metal cabinet in the back wall, unlocking it with a hidden code. Star watched in silence, still gripping the rifle he gave her. Her heart was beating fast, but it wasn't from fear. It was something else. She had known Luke as a kind human, a quiet man who lived in the woods, but the weapons, the bunker, the old neural blocker, none of it matched the man she remembered. You were more than just a farmer, she finally said. Luke nodded slowly. I was someone else before you met me. He opened the cabinet fully, revealing rows of worn files, data drives, and medals covered in dust. Earth Defense Unit 9, Star read the badge, her voice low. You fought in the border rebellions. I did, Luke answered. Long ago. I thought Earth didn't join that war, she said. They didn't officially, he replied, but a few of us were sent anyway under the radar. He walked over to a table and placed an old map on it. Star looked down and saw star systems marked in red, yellow, and black ink. These systems were targeted by the same group that took you, he explained. They've been hunting gifted species for decades, testing them, breaking them. Star touched one of the red dots. This is where I was taken, she said softly. Luke looked at her. Then maybe you know what this place really is. He pointed to a spot marked with a black X. Her eyes narrowed. I've seen this symbol, she whispered. On the collars, the labs, the sleeping chambers. Luke's jaw tightened. They called it Project Silence, he said. And we thought we shut it down years ago. Star turned to him, her face pale. You were part of the team that tried to stop it. Yes, Luke said, and I failed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire above crackled faintly, and the hum of nearby drones buzzed in. The air vents, Star finally stepped back from the table. Then this isn't just about me, she said. Luke shook his head. No, it's about all of us. Suddenly, the console blinked red. Warning, perimeter breach, flashed on the screen. Luke rushed to the panel, typing commands quickly. Cameras are down, power grid is being probed, he muttered. They're trying to shut us in. Star grabbed her weapon and ran to the ladder. No, Luke said firmly. We stay here until I activate the second layer. Second layer? He pressed his hand to a scanner on the wall, and a hidden door slid open behind the shelves. Inside was a narrow tunnel, carved deep beneath the earth. I built this in case of attack, he said. It leads to the riverbed, 1 mile out. Star stared at him, shocked. You built all this just for me? Luke looked away, then said, I didn't know if you'd return. But if you did, I wanted to make sure you had a way out. She stepped forward and touched his hand. You waited all this time. I did, he said quietly. You still believe in me. I never stopped. The lights flickered again. Come on, Luke said. They'll be here any minute. Together they entered the tunnel, closing the door behind them. Above them, the cabin fell silent once more. As shadows moved into the trees, the hunters had arrived, but the prey was already moving. The tunnel walls were narrow and damp. Water dripped slowly from above as Luke and Star moved through the darkness. Their footsteps echoed faintly, and the silence between them grew heavy. Star held her weapon tightly, but her hands had stopped shaking. They reached the end of the tunnel where a rusted ladder led upward. Luke climbed first and pushed open a small hatch hidden under thick grass. Cool air rushed in, mixed with the sound of the river flowing nearby. He pulled her up gently, and they crawled out beneath the cover of night. They were safe for now, but Star kept glancing over her shoulder, as if danger still breathed on her neck. Luke led her to an old shed by the river, long forgotten and overgrown with vines. Inside, it was dusty but dry, with old furniture and a stove that still worked. He lit a small fire and placed a blanket over her shoulders. You can rest here, he said. I'll keep watch. She looked at him for a long time, eyes searching his face. You didn't have to do all this, she said softly. I know, he replied. But I wanted to. She sat by the fire and took off her gloves, revealing small scars along her fingers. Luke noticed them, but said nothing. Instead, he sat across from her and began heating a kettle of water. After a while, she whispered, "Do you still grow strawberries?" Luke smiled faintly. "Yeah, behind the cabin, though the birds get most of them now. I used to sneak out at night and eat them," she said. "You always knew, but never stopped me." "I figured if you were eating strawberries, you were healing," he said. A quiet moment passed and Star leaned back against the wall. "I forgot how quiet Earth is," she said. "No alarms, no orders, no noise inside my head." Luke looked at her. "They did something to you, didn't they?" She nodded slowly. "They tried to erase who I was, gave me new names, new memories." Her voice trembled. "But I never forgot yours." He got up and poured her a cup of tea, warm and sweet. She took it with both hands, held it close. "Do you hate what I've become?" she asked, not looking up. Luke shook his head. "You survived, Star, and you came back. That's what matters." Her eyes glistened in the firelight. "I don't know how to be normal anymore," she said. "You don't have to be," Luke answered. "Just be here with me for now." She looked at him again, really looked. The man who once sheltered her, fed her, listened to her broken words when she had no voice. He had aged, more gray in his hair, more lines on his face, but his eyes were the same. "You waited so long," she whispered. "I had a promise to keep," he said, "and I never break promises." That night, she didn't sleep far from him like before. She sat beside the fire, close enough to hear his breath. The flames flickered softly, and she rested her head against his shoulder without a word. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stayed beside her, warm and steady. And for the first time in years, Star closed her eyes and slept without fear. No alarms, no chains, no cold lights, only the sound of the river and the steady heartbeat of the man who never gave up on her. Outside, the sky turned slowly from black to silver. A new day had come, and though they were still being hunted, something stronger had begun to grow. Trust. Morning light broke through the wooden cracks of the shed. Birds chirped outside, and the river whispered nearby. Luke stirred from his sleep on the floor, while Star sat silently by the window, watching the woods. She hadn't slept much. Too many memories had returned, and one feeling still gnawed at her. Something was wrong. Luke stretched and walked over, offering her a small piece of bread and dried fruit. She took it with a nod, but didn't eat. Instead, her hand kept touching the side of her neck just below her ear. "Something bothering you?" Luke asked, noticing her unease. "I feel a hum," she whispered, "like something is awake inside me." He paused, his face suddenly serious. "Did they ever implant anything in you?" "I don't remember," she said. "They wiped parts of my memory, replaced others." Her fingers trembled. "But what if they left something inside me?" Luke went to his bag and pulled out a small scanner, one he hadn't used in years. He powered it up and brought it close to her neck, moving slowly, carefully. For a moment nothing happened. Then the screen blinked red. Star's breath caught. "What does that mean?" Luke frowned. "It means you're still tagged." She stood up quickly, panic rising. "No, I destroyed the tag. I threw it into the fire." Luke shook his head. "They didn't put it in your gear. They put it in you." She backed away, heart pounding. "All this time, I led them to you," she whispered. "I put you in danger again." Luke stepped forward, calm but firm. "We'll fix this," he said, "but we have to move fast." He grabbed a toolkit and motioned for her to sit. Star hesitated but then nodded and sat on a low stool, pulling her hair back. "I can try to remove it," Luke said, "but it's close to a nerve cluster. One wrong move." "Do it," she said, cutting him off. "Better to die free than live as their signal." He took a deep breath and cleaned the area. With steady hands, he made a small incision behind her ear. She winced, but didn't cry out. Blood trickled down her neck as Luke searched carefully. Then he found it, a tiny black chip, no bigger than a grain of rice, pulsing with a dim red glow. "Got it," he whispered. He slowly pulled it free and dropped it into a small lead box. Star let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Luke closed the wound and pressed a patch against her skin. "Is it over?" she asked weakly. "Not yet," he said, sealing the box. It was active just moments ago. They'll be here soon. She stood slowly, the pain in her neck nothing compared to the relief in her heart. Thank you, she said, her voice cracking. Luke nodded. We'll burn the box and bury the ashes miles from here. And then? She asked. Then we run, he replied, but smarter this time. As they packed their things, a low hum filled the sky. She looked up through the crack in the roof. They're coming, she said, voice steady now. But this time, I'm ready. And she was, not just with weapons or armor, but with the truth. The tracker was gone. And for the first time, she felt clean. They stepped outside, wind brushing their faces. Somewhere above the clouds, black ships circled, searching for a signal that no longer existed. But Star had changed the game, and they were no longer the hunters. Luke looked at her and smiled. You've really grown. She gave a faint smile back. I had a good teacher. Dark clouds gathered above the forest as Luke and Star moved quickly along the river's edge. The sky rumbled, deep and angry, and the wind began to rise. Star pulled her cloak tighter, but the cold air still cut through her armor. Luke checked the map in his hand. An old military outpost lay a few miles ahead, hidden in the cliffs. We'll take shelter there, he said, shouting over the wind. Star nodded, but she looked pale. Her wound from the tracker removal was starting to ache, and her steps were slowing. She didn't say anything, but Luke noticed. You're hurting, he said. I'll manage, she replied, forcing a smile. But her hand pressed against the patch on her neck, and he could see the blood had soaked through. They reached the edge of a canyon just as the rain began to fall. Cold drops hit the ground like tiny hammers. Luke found the old path and led her to a rock wall. Behind thick vines and moss was a hidden door, rusted but still locked tight. He used a special key from his belt, and with a heavy click, the door opened. They stepped inside, and the storm roared behind them. The door sealed shut, blocking out the wind and the dark clouds outside. Inside was a long-forgotten bunker, cold, quiet, and lined with metal walls. Lights flickered on slowly, powered by an old backup system. Dust filled the air, and the smell of rust clung to everything. Luke led her to a small room once used for field surgery. He wiped the table clean and helped her lie down. Her breathing was shallow, her body cold. The chip left something inside, he said, checking the scanner again. Shards? She asked weakly. Yes, he said, frowning. Sharp ones, and they're close to a nerve line. We have to get them out now. Star closed her eyes and whispered, I trust you. The storm outside roared louder, lightning flashing across the sky. Inside, Luke worked quickly. Carefully, he peened the wound again, using what tools he had left. Every movement made Star flinch, but she didn't scream. Blood dripped onto the metal table, and Luke's hands shook for the first time in years. He wasn't a doctor, but he'd seen enough in war to know what to do. He whispered calmly to her as he worked. Almost there. Stay with me. You're doing great. Finally, he found them. 3 tiny metal shards buried deep, still glowing faintly. He pulled them out one by one, placing them in a metal dish. Then he cleaned the wound, sealed it, and wrapped her neck in fresh bandages. She lay still for a moment, then whispered, Did we win? Luke smiled tiredly. For now. Thunder cracked above them, shaking the walls, but inside, there was silence. Luke sat beside her, watching her sleep. Her face, even pale and tired, still had that same glow from years ago. She had survived pain, war, and cruelty. Yet she still came back to him. He looked at the glowing shards on the table. They used her like a weapon, he muttered, but she's stronger than they ever knew. Hours passed and the storm began to fade. Star woke slowly, her eyes blinking in the dim light. Luke helped her sit up, offering her a sip of water. She drank quietly, then leaned her head on his shoulder. I almost didn't make it, she whispered. But you did, he replied. You saved me again. And I'd do it again, he said without hesitation. The rain stopped and a soft calm settled over the land. But deep in the sky, far above the clouds, enemy ships were still searching. Star and Luke knew this peace was temporary. But in this quiet moment, they weren't soldiers, fugitives, or survivors. They were just two souls, finally resting after too long in the storm. The old outpost was silent. The storm had passed, leaving behind a soft drizzle and heavy clouds. Inside, the fire Luke had built in the corner crackled softly, its warmth filling the cold space. Star sat wrapped in a blanket, her back leaning against the wall. She hadn't spoken for hours. Her eyes stared at nothing, and her body looked small again, like the tiny girl she once was. Luke sat nearby, repairing her damaged armor piece by piece. He didn't push her to talk. He knew the silence wasn't empty. It was full of things too hard to say out loud. Finally, Star whispered, "I never meant to leave that way." Her voice was low and shaky. "I didn't know they would take me so far, or for so long." Luke looked up, setting the armor aside. "You don't have to explain," he said gently. "Yes, I do," she replied, her hands trembling in her lap. "I told you I was grown, but I was just scared." She wiped her eyes quickly, but the tears kept coming. "They made me do things, horrible things," she said, her voice cracking. "They called it training, but it was breaking." Luke moved closer, sitting beside her without a word. "They erased my name," she continued. "Made me a number, a weapon. They punished me when I remembered you." He stayed quiet, listening. His hand rested gently over hers, not pulling, just being there. "But I kept your voice," she said, her eyes shining with tears. "In my mind, I replayed the day you gave me strawberries, the way you said you're safe now. It was the only part of me they couldn't take." Luke's chest tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "I dreamed of this place," she whispered. "Of your cabin, the stars above it. I didn't think I'd ever find it again." "You did," he said softly. She nodded. Then her body shook as the sobs came harder. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she buried her face in her hands. "I feel broken," she cried. "Not saint. Wrong, not brave, just broken." Luke leaned forward and pulled her into his arms. She didn't resist. She sank into him like a child lost in a nightmare. He held her tightly, one hand on her back, the other cradling her head. "You're not broken," he said quietly. "You're still you. You came back, you fought, and you're still standing." "That's not weakness, Star," he whispered. "That's strength." She clung to him like he was the last real thing in the galaxy, and in that moment, the warrior vanished. Only the girl remained. The fire burned lower, but its warmth spread through the room. Luke rocked her gently, like a father calming a crying daughter. And for the first time in years, she let herself cry freely, without shame. She cried for the pain, for the memories, for the time lost, and for the strange feeling of being safe again. When the tears finally slowed, she looked up at him, eyes swollen, voice weak. "Why do you still care?" Luke smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Because I saw you before they tried to change you. And I see you now." Her lips trembled, but a tiny smile appeared. "I missed this," she whispered. "You, this place, this feeling." He nodded. "You're home now," he said. And outside, while enemy ships still searched the skies, inside that old bunker, healing had begun, not with weapons or escape, but with tears and trust, and the return of something long thought lost. Hope. Morning light filtered through the broken glass of the outpost's upper windows. Star was finally resting peacefully, her breathing steady as she slept curled up under the blanket. Luke stood at the console in the hallway, checking the satellite uplink he'd just repaired. The screen flickered and then came alive, displaying garbled data and a string of intercepted signals. He frowned, his fingers moving quickly. A series of codes flashed across the screen, encrypted messages bouncing across deep space channels. He followed the signal trail until one message caught his eye. It wasn't about Star, it was about him. "Priority. Human asset identified," the message read. "Target. Subject 74 Delta, former Earth defense operative, now designated traitor." Luke stared at the screen, his jaw clenched. They had found his file, his history, and his face. "They know me now," he whispered. Behind him, Star stirred, waking slowly. She rubbed her eyes and sat up, still groggy but alert. "What is it?" she asked, sensing something was wrong. Luke turned to her, the weight of the message in his eyes. "They've shifted their focus," he said. You're not the only target anymore. She blinked. What do you mean? He showed her the message, and her face turned pale. They're after you now, she whispered. Luke nodded. They scanned the tracker while it was inside you. They saw me, heard my voice, maybe even traced the coordinates to this region. Star stood quickly, her voice rising. Then we have to leave, now. Luke grabbed her shoulder gently. It's not just about hiding anymore. They'll keep coming, and this time, they'll bring a whole fleet. Star's mind raced. She had escaped for freedom, but she had unknowingly dragged him into the fire with her. I should leave, she said. If I go alone, they'll stop tracking you. No, Luke said firmly. I won't let you carry this alone. She stared at him, confused. Why? Because I'm part of this now, he said. They built their empire on silence, and I stayed quiet for too long. He paused, then added, It's time we make them afraid of what we remember. Star stepped back, eyes filled with worry. You could be killed. We both could, Luke replied, but running doesn't stop monsters. We fight back. The console beeped again. Another alert. Star rushed over and read the message. 2 dropships entering low orbit, she said. 1 scans as a hunter class. Luke nodded, already packing supplies. They won't stop until they wipe every trace. But now we're not just hiding, he said with a slight smile. We're leading them somewhere. She raised an eyebrow. Where? To the truth, Luke answered. You still have the prison map, right? Star touched the hidden pouch in her belt and nodded. Then we show the galaxy what they've done. She hesitated, then walked up to him, her voice softer now. If we do this, there's no turning back. There never was, he replied, looking straight into her eyes. And this time, we're not alone. Star placed her hand over his. She wasn't the same tiny girl who had once whispered goodbye in the snow, and he wasn't just a quiet man with a cabin anymore. They were something stronger together. A light flashed through the high windows. One of the dropships had broken through the clouds. Star looked up, her voice steady now. Let them come, she said. Luke smiled, gripping his weapon. They'll wish they hadn't. The mountains in the distance were quiet. Snow began to fall softly, like it had on the day she first left. But this time, Star wasn't running. She stood tall beside Luke, her armor shining under the cold morning sky. Below them, enemy dropships circled near the old outpost. Searchlights swept across the trees, scanning for heat, movement, signs of life. But the targets they were looking for were already gone. Luke and Star had moved ahead, up into the cliffs where no scanners reached. From this height, they could see it all. The land she once called strange, the planet she had feared, the place that had become her only home. Luke adjusted the signal jammer they carried in a backpack. It masked their movements, but not for long. Once we're in range, we send the data to the resistance cell, he said. They'll spread it across 5 systems. Star held the small glowing map close to her chest. The names of the forgotten, the lost, the enslaved. It was all there. She would no longer carry it alone. They reached a narrow cave hidden in the rock. Inside was a working comms relay. One Luke had repaired just 2 days ago. It was now or never. Star linked the device, and blue light flooded the small cave. One by one, data streams began uploading to distant satellites. Then came the message. Her voice, calm and steady. This is for those who cannot speak, she said. This is proof of what they've done and who they've taken. We were never lost. We were silenced, but not anymore. Luke watched her, pride in his eyes. She wasn't just a survivor, she was a spark, and sparks started revolutions. Suddenly the console beeped. Someone was tracing the signal. Star looked at Luke, and he already knew. They're faster than expected, he said, pulling out the last jammer beacon. If I throw this, it'll pull them west for a few minutes. That's all we need, she replied. He stepped in, and outside the cave, flung the beacon into the air and ducked back in. Moments later, explosions lit the sky where the false signal had gone. The enemy chased shadows. Again, inside the cave, the upload reached 100%. The map was no longer just hers. It belonged to the galaxy now. She turned to Luke, her voice soft. It's done. He let out a long breath. Then it's time to disappear. They hiked deeper into the forest, into lands untouched by machines. Each step forward felt lighter, not because the danger was gone, but because they had done something that mattered. Later that night, they camped near a quiet stream. Stars blinked above them, and the fire cracked gently between them. Star sat close, her head resting on Luke's shoulder. She looked up at him and whispered, "Do you remember what I said before I left?" Luke nodded. "You said you were grown." She smiled softly. "I wasn't. But now I think I am." He chuckled, brushing a leaf from her hair. "You've changed, but not completely. You're still the same girl who used to steal strawberries at night." She laughed, a real laugh, the kind he hadn't heard in years. Then her voice turned quiet again. "I used to think I didn't belong anywhere," she said, "that I had no place, no people." She paused, then looked into his eyes. "But I was wrong," she whispered. "I belong here with you." Luke didn't speak right away. He just took her hand in his and held it gently. No words were needed, because in that moment she knew. She was no longer a runaway, no longer a weapon, no longer just a survivor. She was home now.